Most people believe laziness is a flaw in their personality. They think they were born lazy, that it's a character defect, something that makes them inherently unmotivated, but that's not true. Laziness is not the root problem, it's a symptom, a surface-level expression of something much deeper happening in the mind. Laziness is a mask, a disguise that covers fear, confusion, self-doubt, and sometimes even trauma. When someone sits idle and avoids action, it's not because they don't want to succeed. It's because something inside them is holding them back, and most of the time, they don't even know what that is. We live in a world where people are constantly pushed to move fast, achieve more, and be in a state of constant motion. But no one ever stops to ask, why am I not moving? Why can't I get myself to do what I know I should be doing? That's where the real work begins. Destroying laziness is not about forcing yourself to grind or hustle harder. It's about identifying what's stopping the engine from running in the first place. It's like seeing a car parked for too long and blaming the car for being lazy, without ever checking if the fuel tank is empty, if the battery is dead, or if the engine is broken. We are not broken, we are blocked. Laziness often stems from uncertainty. When you don't know what you want or why you're doing something, the mind resists movement. Think about it. When was the last time you were deeply inspired, fully engaged in something that mattered to you? Were you lazy then? Of course not. You had energy, you had focus, you had clarity. The resistance only shows up when there's doubt, fear, or lack of connection to the goal. That's why clarity is the antidote. You can't destroy laziness with just motivation. You destroy it with vision, with purpose so strong it demands action. Another invisible cause of laziness is internal conflict. This happens when one part of you wants success, but another part fears it. One part of you wants to speak up, but another part fears rejection. You want to start a business, but deep down you're afraid of failure. This tug-of-war inside creates paralysis. The body doesn't move. The mind circles around excuses, and you call it laziness, but it's not. It's conflict. It's a clash between your desire and your belief. Until you resolve that conflict, your actions will always be inconsistent. And then there's the weight of past experiences. Maybe you failed before. Maybe you were ridiculed, told you weren't good enough, or you tried something and it didn't work. So now, each time you want to take a new step, your mind pulls out the memory file of pain and says, "Don't do it, stay still, it's safer here." This self-protective mechanism gets labeled as laziness, but it's really fear in disguise. The body and mind are trying to avoid pain, but in the process, they're also avoiding growth, success, fulfillment, and purpose. Let's also not ignore emotional exhaustion. When someone is overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, pressure, or unprocessed emotions, the body naturally slows down. Energy drops, focus disappears, passion fades. You don't get lazy, you get tired, you get disconnected, you get stuck, and then you beat yourself up for being lazy, which only adds another layer of guilt and shame on top of the already existing emotional load. It's like carrying a heavy backpack and blaming yourself for not running. First, you must drop the backpack. First, you must release what's weighing you down. Destroying laziness means becoming aware of the stories you've been telling yourself. Every day you say, "I'm lazy," you're reinforcing an identity, and the subconscious mind takes that identity and creates behavior to match it. The more you say it, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the more you act on it. This is why you can't afford to casually say things like "I'm lazy" or "I'm not disciplined." Words shape beliefs, and beliefs control actions. The chain is simple: thought, belief, action, result. If the root thought is broken, the result can't be fixed. When you understand this, you stop fighting laziness on the surface and start dealing with it at the level where it lives, the subconscious, you start asking deeper questions. You stop blaming and start investigating. What am I afraid of? What am I unclear about? What am I trying to protect myself from? Why don't I feel worthy of success? This internal questioning unlocks answers that motivational videos or productivity hacks never will. You begin to see that your inaction is actually a call for healing, not punishment. The solution, then, is not to push harder, but to go deeper, to sit in silence and listen to what your resistance is trying to tell you, to trace the emotion, to observe the thought pattern, to gently dismantle the limiting beliefs that tell you you're not ready, not good enough, or not capable. This is the real battle, not against laziness, but against the lies in your mind that create it. Once those lies lose their power, laziness evaporates like fog under the sun. You begin to act not because you forced yourself, but because there's nothing left in the way. The path becomes clear. The energy returns, the spark reignites, and the movement begins. Your self-image is the silent commander of your life. It controls your behavior, your attitude, your thoughts, and even your limits. People don't act based on what they know, they act based on who they believe they are. That's why two individuals can read the same book, hear the same advice, even live in the same environment, yet produce completely different results. The difference isn't in the outside world. It's in the image they hold of themselves on the inside. If you carry the identity of someone who's weak, lazy, or not good enough, it doesn't matter how many opportunities come your way, you'll find a way to sabotage them, because you don't believe you deserve them. This image isn't something we're born with. It's something we build piece by piece, moment by moment, shaped by experiences, opinions, environments, and most of all, repetition. When a child constantly hears they're not smart, not fast, not capable, those words don't stay on the outside. They begin to sink in, forming beliefs that slowly become identity. And once a belief turns into identity, it starts to dictate behavior. You won't raise your hand in class, not because you're shy, but because deep down you don't believe your voice matters. You won't start the business, not because you don't have the skills, but because you see yourself as someone who always plays small. Laziness often grows from this kind of internal blueprint. When you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, who gives up easily, who lacks consistency, that image becomes the script, and your mind will always try to keep your actions in harmony with that script. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it wants to stay consistent. The subconscious mind craves consistency between self-image and behavior. So if you start acting differently, waking up early, pushing yourself, working harder, but your internal self-image still says, "I'm lazy," eventually the mind pulls you back. That's why change feels so hard. It's not that you can't change. It's that your actions are fighting your identity. You have to understand that every result in your life is a mirror of how you see yourself. Not what you want, but what you believe you are. Wanting to be rich while seeing yourself as broke won't change your bank account. Wanting to be disciplined while calling yourself lazy every day won't change your habits. The outer world reflects the inner image, always. If you want to destroy laziness, the most important battle is not on the to-do list or the calendar. It's in the mirror, because the version of you who isn't lazy already exists. You're just not living as them yet. You're still trapped in the outdated image of who you used to be. This is why affirmations, visualization, and mental rehearsal are powerful tools, not because they're mystical, but because they reprogram the self-image. When you close your eyes and vividly imagine yourself waking up early, moving with energy, speaking with confidence, and finishing your tasks with excellence, You are creating a new mental model. And the more frequently you feed your mind that image, the more real it becomes. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality, so, with repetition, it starts accepting this new image as truth, and once that image becomes the new blueprint, your behavior will begin to match it. Think of your self-image like a thermostat. If it's set at 65 degrees and you open the window to let warm air in, the thermostat will automatically trigger the cooling system to bring the temperature back to 65. That's what happens when you try to improve your life without changing your self-image. You might work hard for a while, push yourself to be more productive, but if your internal setting still says lazy, undisciplined, or unmotivated, you'll eventually find yourself back in the same patterns. Your life always returns to the level of your self-image. Raise the image and the results will follow. And the truth is, no one else can see your self-image, but they all experience its effects. Your confidence, your choices, your voice, your habits, all of it is shaped by how you see yourself. If you constantly speak words of limitation, doubt, or weakness, it's because your internal picture is still one of lack. But when you begin to shift the way you see yourself, your language shifts too. You begin to say things like, I'm becoming more consistent, I follow through on what I start, I take action even when I don't feel like it. These aren't lies, they're declarations of a new identity. And every time you say them, you carve that identity deeper into your subconscious. You don't wait until you feel different to create a new image. You act as if the new image is already true. You walk like that version of you. You talk like them. You move like them. And eventually your brain starts to agree. It says, this is who we are now. That's when the magic happens, not overnight, but inevitably. Because self-image doesn't change in a day, it changes through daily, deliberate repetition. It changes when you decide to stop defining yourself by your past and start living according to your potential. The real you isn't lazy. The real you isn't stuck. The real you is powerful beyond measure. You just have to build the image strong enough to let that version lead. You are not your emotions. You are the one who experiences them, observes them, and has the power to decide what to do with them. That is a truth most people never fully embrace, and it's the very reason they stay stuck. They let emotions lead the way, forgetting that emotions are signals, not commands. When negative feelings show up, fear, doubt, insecurity, guilt, frustration, most people surrender. They believe that if they feel unmotivated, they must be unmotivated. If they feel tired, they must be incapable of action. But that's not the case. The ability to act exists even in the presence of discomfort. Power comes not from feeling good, but from choosing action despite how you feel. Negative emotions are not the enemy, they are messengers. They arise from the stories we've been told, the beliefs we've absorbed, and the way we interpret the world, but they don't define who we are. If you've been carrying fear, that fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means your mind is trying to protect you based on past experiences. If you feel anxious, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your nervous system is on high alert. The mistake people make is identifying with these feelings. They say, I am scared, I am anxious, I am not enough, instead of recognizing those feelings as temporary waves that pass through. You are not the wave, you are the ocean it moves through. The real shift happens when you stop reacting and start responding. Reacting is automatic, it's emotional, it's driven by fear, past programming, and lack of awareness. Responding is conscious, it's intentional. It means acknowledging what you feel but not being ruled by it. That is strength, that is mastery. That is the beginning of freedom from laziness, procrastination, and self-sabotage. Because those patterns are not the result of a weak will, they are reactions to emotional patterns that haven't been questioned. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being good enough, all of them create hesitation, and the hesitation is labeled as laziness. You can't overcome laziness by pushing against it. You overcome it by understanding the emotional root of it. Maybe you're not taking action because deep down you fear it won't work. Maybe you avoid starting because starting means facing the possibility of falling short. Those fears are valid, but they're not final. They only become powerful when you give them permission to guide your decisions. And every time you obey those feelings, you reinforce them. Every time you avoid action because it feels hard, you're strengthening the connection between emotion and behavior. The key is to break that link. To teach your mind that fear is not a red light, it's a green light that says, this is where growth begins. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward while the fear is still present. The most successful people you admire feel fear too. They feel doubt. They feel resistance. The only difference is they've trained themselves to move anyway. They've stopped waiting to feel confident and started choosing to act with intention. They understand that emotions are just part of the weather, they come and go, but their purpose, their mission, their vision, that's the anchor. That's what keeps them moving when everything else says stop. You can create that same inner strength. It starts by developing emotional awareness. Every time you feel a wave of resistance, ask yourself, what am I afraid of right now? What story am I telling myself that's making this moment feel heavy? Where did this belief come from, and is it even true? When you start observing your emotions instead of obeying them, you create space, and in that space, you gain power. You realize you have a choice. You don't have to act on every emotion. You can feel tired and still take one step. You can feel scared and still press send. You can feel overwhelmed and still organize one corner of your world. That's where transformation begins, not by changing the feeling, but by changing your relationship with it. The emotional mind is fast, reactive, and dramatic. It wants you to stay safe, stay hidden, stay the same. But your higher self, the one with vision, clarity, and purpose, knows you were made for more. The challenge is learning to hear that voice over the noise of fear. That's what emotional mastery is. Not eliminating negative emotions, but rising above them, recognizing them without becoming them, letting them pass without holding on. Every moment you act in spite of emotion, you weaken the old program. You rewrite your identity. You become the kind of person who acts no matter how they feel. And you don't need to be perfect at this. You just need to be consistent. Each small act of courage, each decision to move instead of freeze, builds a new pattern. And over time, your nervous system learns action is safe, change is possible, growth doesn't have to be painful. You stop living in survival mode and start operating from creation, from power, from intention. That's when the laziness begins to fade, not because you fought it directly, but because the emotions feeding it no longer have control over you. They no longer write the script, you do. And that's when life starts to shift, because your actions are no longer controlled by fleeting emotion, they're guided by conscious choice. Most people believe that they can overcome laziness with sheer willpower by pushing harder, forcing action, or trying to stay motivated through hype and adrenaline. But that's not how lasting change happens. Willpower is like a muscle, it gets tired. It fades by the end of the day, and it's unreliable when emotions are high. What actually rewires your behavior is repetition. The subconscious mind, which governs 95% of your daily actions, doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to patterns. Whatever you repeat, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, becomes embedded in your system and starts to operate automatically. This is how habits are formed, and this is also how laziness gets replaced. The truth is, your current behavior is the result of mental programming. You weren't born procrastinating, avoiding action, or quitting early. You learned those patterns, maybe from your environment, maybe from repeated failures that conditioned you to expect defeat, maybe from people around you who labeled you or made you doubt your ability. Whatever the source, the programming became part of your identity through constant repetition. Now, if you want to break free, you have to install a new program, one that is built through deliberate, repeated action. This is why small, consistent actions are more powerful than occasional bursts of motivation. One small victory, repeated daily, has more transformational impact than a single day of extreme productivity followed by burnout. Repetition is what conditions the subconscious to accept a new reality. If you wake up every day and write for 5 minutes, exercise for 10, or do one hard thing over time, your mind starts to see you as someone who follows through. You stop being the person who tries. You become the person who does. It's not the size of the action that matters, it's the consistency that rewires the internal model. Repetition builds identity. If you do something enough times, your mind starts to believe, this is who I am now. And once identity shifts, the behavior becomes natural. It's no longer something you force, it's something you do because it feels aligned with who you are. Think of how you learned to walk, write, drive, or speak your native language. You didn't do it through motivation or willpower. You did it through practice, through doing it so many times that your body and mind absorbed it into memory. That's how you reprogram laziness too, not by fighting it, but by consistently choosing the opposite. Now here's where most people make a mistake. They try to make massive changes all at once. They go from 0 to 100 overnight. Wake up at 5 a.m., meditate for an hour, write in a journal, work out, start a business all in one day. But the subconscious resists drastic change. It gets overwhelmed. It retreats. It pulls you back into the comfort zone. The secret is to go small and go steady. Change one thing, stick with it. Let it become part of your identity. Then add the next. That's how you build sustainable transformation. That's how you destroy the internal model of laziness without burning yourself out. Another critical part of repetition is mental rehearsal, visualization. The brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined action and real action. If you see yourself waking up early, moving with confidence, completing tasks, and taking charge of your life, and you do this consistently in your mind, your brain begins to accept it. That's why athletes, entrepreneurs, and performers use visualization, because it primes the nervous system to behave as if it has already succeeded. When you combine physical repetition with mental repetition, your growth accelerates. You're reinforcing the new identity from two angles: thought and action. Affirmations are another tool that work when used consistently, but they must be emotional, specific, and repeated with belief. Saying "I am productive" once won't do anything, but saying it every morning with emotion while taking action to back it up starts to rewire the subconscious. The mind learns through association. So when the words "I am focused" are linked to moments where you actually focus, the brain builds new pathways. Over time, the old narrative "I'm lazy, I always quit" gets overwritten, but it only happens with repetition. There is no shortcut to reprogramming. It's a daily practice, and yes, there will be resistance. You will have days where the old habits try to come back. That's normal, that's expected, but that's also where the magic is. Every time you choose the new behavior, even when it's uncomfortable, you weaken the old program. You send a message to your subconscious, we don't do that anymore, and the more times you send that message, the more permanent the change becomes. You can't just want the result, you have to become the person who lives that result every day. And you do that through repetition. If you rely on motivation, you will always be inconsistent. If you rely on repetition, you will build momentum. Momentum turns action into habit. Habit turns into identity. Identity determines your destiny. It all starts with what you choose to repeat. Whether it's a small action, a spoken word, or a visualized outcome, every repetition is a vote for the future you. You don't need to be extreme. You just need to be consistent. That's how the lazy version of you fades. Not by force, but by being replaced, one repeated action at a time. Your destiny doesn't live in comfort. It lives in the places that scare you, stretch you, and challenge everything you've ever believed about yourself. Every time you choose comfort over growth, every time you avoid the hard thing, every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, you're not just postponing a task, you're postponing your destiny. Laziness isn't just about wasting time. It's about giving up moments that could shift the entire course of your life. People don't realize that the smallest act of courage can open a door that leads to everything they've ever wanted. But that door never opens for the person who stays comfortable. Growth lives in discomfort, and destiny waits on the other side of it. The reason most people never step into their potential is because discomfort feels like danger. Your brain is wired to protect you, not to push you forward. It doesn't care if you fulfill your purpose or live an extraordinary life. It only cares that you survive. That's why your instincts pull you toward the familiar. Stay in bed. Don't take the risk. Don't speak up. Don't start. Don't change. And if you obey those instincts long enough, they become your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who's always tired, who never finishes what they start, who just can't seem to stay consistent. But none of that is truth. It's just a pattern reinforced by repetition, built on the fear of discomfort. Every person who has changed the world, every innovator, creator, leader had to make peace with discomfort. They had to get up when it was easier to stay down. They had to keep going when failure felt unbearable. They had to act when no one believed in them, including themselves. They didn't feel ready. They didn't feel brave. But they moved anyway, because at some point they realized that their destiny would never be handed to them. It had to be claimed, and claiming it meant walking straight into the resistance, into the pain, into the unknown. That's what separates people who make it from people who stay stuck. Not talent, not intelligence, but the willingness to do what's uncomfortable over and over again. Every time you face discomfort, you're being given an opportunity to change your identity, to prove to yourself that you're no longer ruled by the past, no longer limited by old beliefs, no longer controlled by fear. You build strength every time you do something that the old version of you would avoid. When you wake up early, even when your body screams no, when you open that blank page and write, even when the inspiration isn't there, when you choose action over excuses, even when nobody's watching. That's how transformation happens, not in grand gestures, but in ordinary moments when you choose courage over comfort. Your future doesn't belong to the person who waits until they feel ready. It belongs to the person who moves forward in the face of uncertainty. Waiting for the perfect mood, the perfect moment, the perfect motivation, it's a trap. That moment never comes. Life will always offer you a reason to wait. The ones who win are the ones who stop negotiating with their feelings. They don't ask, do I feel like it today? They ask, who am I becoming by doing this? They move because they've decided that their destiny is worth more than their comfort. They've stopped playing small because they understand that every second matters. And in each second, a choice is made: grow or stay the same, and that's the truth that will separate you from the masses. Most people will live the same year 70 times and call it a life, not because they lack potential, but because they avoid discomfort. They choose what's easy in the moment, never realizing it costs them what they truly want in the long run. But you don't have to live that way. You can decide today that every ounce of pain you feel while growing is shaping you into someone powerful, focused, and unstoppable. You can decide that every uncomfortable step you take is pulling you closer to the version of yourself you were always meant to become, the one who doesn't give up, the one who finishes, the one who leads, creates, inspires, and transforms. Discomfort is not punishment, it's preparation. It's the gym for your mind, your character, and your discipline. Every time you feel resistance, it's life giving you a chance to level up, to leave behind the old, lazy, small version of yourself and step into someone new. Someone who makes decisions from purpose, not fear. Someone who acts on vision, not feelings. Someone who lives intentionally, not reactively. That person is already inside of you. They just haven't been activated yet. They're waiting for you on the other side of discomfort. And yes, there will be pain, there will be doubt, there will be days when nothing seems to work, when progress feels invisible, when you wonder if the effort is even worth it. But those are the days that define you, because those are the days when most people quit. And if you can keep moving on the days when quitting feels easier, you separate yourself from 99% of the world. Not because you had an advantage, not because you had more time, money, or support, but because you refused to settle. You refused to let laziness dictate your future. You refused to allow comfort to steal your destiny. You chose to act even when it hurt. You chose to show up even when it didn't make sense, and that choice is what builds greatness. That choice is what shapes a legacy. That choice is what makes the difference between a life of regret and a life of meaning.